Fortune Podcast, From Pain and Prison to Purpose, Episode 11. I am Fortune Reigns, and this is Fortune. Segment 1. What you have already proven. 4 episodes in of From Pain and Prison to Purpose. If you have been here from episode 7, you have covered more real ground than most people cover in years of aimless searching. You made a decision. You built a structure. You confronted your identity, your generational patterns, the trust you broke, and the trust you need to rebuild. You navigated systems, money, community, fatherhood, mental health, purpose, and discipline. That is not a small body of work. And before we go any further, it is worth pausing to acknowledge something that most people in your position are never told. The fact that you are still here, still engaged, still applying is itself evidence that the decision you made was real. Evidence that the structure you built is holding. Evidence that who you are becoming is more than an intention. It is a direction you are actively moving in. Most people quit long before this point, not because they lack potential, because they lack proof that they are capable of following through. You are building that proof right now with every episode you complete, with every action step you execute, with every day you show up from the standard you have set for yourself. Again, I repeat, with every day you show up for the standard you have set for yourself. That matters. And it matters not just for you, it matters for everyone who is listening to your story unfold, for everyone who will one day hear what you came through and what you chose to build on the other side of it. So, before we go into episode 11, take a moment to acknowledge where you are. Not where you want to be, where you are right now compared to where you started. Here is your action step. Write down 3 things that are different about you today compared to who you were when you began this series. Not circumstances, you, your thinking, your standard, your direction. Read them out loud because that evidence is the foundation of what we are about to build in this episode. You have already proven you can start. Now we talk about how you sustain. Segment 2. Sustaining momentum when the newness wears off. There is a season in every transformation when the initial energy fades. The early momentum, the clarity of the fresh decision, the motivation that comes from finally choosing a new direction. All of that has a natural shelf life. And when it wears off, what is left is the real test. That season is not failure. It is the filter. Because most people interpret the absence of initial energy as a sign that something is wrong, that the direction was wrong, that they are wrong, and they pivot. They start over. They chase the feeling of a new beginning because the new beginning feels like progress. It is not. Progress is what happens after the newness is gone and you show up anyway. Sustaining momentum requires different fuel source than inspiration. It requires systems, accountability, a clear enough vision of where you are going that the temporary discomfort of the plateau does not derail you. It also requires an honest relationship with your own patterns. When do you tend to quit? At what point in a new direction do you historically lose steam? What triggers the drift? Is it when results are slow? When somebody doubts you? When the work becomes repetitive? When life creates disruption? Knowing your pattern is how you interpret it. Because the next time that trigger appears, you will recognize it. And instead of following the old response, you will have a prepared one. You keep moving. Here is your action step. Identify the point in your past where you have most commonly stopped. What was happening? What did it feel like? What did you tell yourself to justify stopping? Write it down. Then write what you will tell yourself instead the next time that moment arrives. Because the plateau is not the end of the road. It is where the road separates the people who arrive from the people who turn back. Stay on the road. Stay on the road. Segment 3. Building a reputation that precedes you. Reputation is not what you say about yourself. It is what others say about you when you are not in the room. And for men who carry a record, reputation is one of the most powerful tools available because it operates in spaces where your paperwork cannot speak for you. When someone vouches for you, when someone says, that man does what he says, that man shows up, that man is trustworthy, that testimony carries weight that no application, no resume, and no credential can fully replicate. Reputation is built slowly and lost quickly, which means the investment is long-term and the standard must be consistent. Every interaction is a deposit or a withdrawal. When you are on time, that is a deposit. When you follow through on what you committed to, that is a deposit. When you handle conflict with maturity, when you admit when you are wrong, when you show up prepared and present, every one of those is a deposit. When you are inconsistent, when you overpromise and underdeliver, when you allow your worst moments to become your most visible ones, those are withdrawals. And the account either grows or it depletes based on the sum of your daily choices. The men who rebuild most powerfully after incarceration are rarely the ones with the most resources at the start. They are the ones who built a reputation for reliability in their immediate environment and then let that reputation open doors that resources alone could not. Your word is your brand. Your consistency is your marketing. Your character is your credential. Here is your action step. Ask yourself honestly, if the 5 people closest to me were asked to describe my reliability in one sentence, what would they say? If the answer is not what you want it to be, identify one specific behavior you can change starting today that would shift that answer over the next 30 days. Because reputation is not assigned, it is earned. Earn it intentionally. Segment 4, turning experience into expertise. Everything you have been through has taught you something. The question is whether you have extracted the lesson clearly enough to use it. Most men who come through incarceration carry a wealth of insight they have never organized. They know how systems operate from the inside. They understand survival under pressure. They have navigated institutional environments, managed conflict without formal authority, and made high-stakes decisions with limited information. Those are not just stories. Those are skills. But skills only become expertise when they are named, organized, and offered in a way that serves others. So you begin the work of extraction. You look at your experience and you ask, what did I learn that someone else needs to know? What did I figure out the hard way that I could show someone else how to navigate? What do I understand about systems, about people, about resilience, about recovery that someone earlier in the process is desperately looking for? That extraction process is how experience becomes expertise. And expertise, communicated clearly and consistently, becomes influence. You do not need a degree to be an expert in what you have lived. You need the clarity to articulate it and the discipline to deliver it consistently. Your story is your curriculum. Your survival is your qualification. Your transformation is your proof of concept. And there is an entire community of people who need what only someone with your specific experience can provide. Here is your action step. Choose one experience from your past that taught you a lesson you could not have learned any other way. Then organize it into 3 parts. What the situation was, what you learned from it, and what someone else can do differently because of what you now know. Write those 3 parts clearly, because that structure is the beginning of your message. And your message is the beginning of your impact. Segment 5. Legacy is built in private before it is seen in public. Everything the world eventually sees was first built in private. the discipline no one applauded, the early AMs before there was any evidence it was working, the kept promises made to yourself when no one else was listening, the decisions to stay the course when quitting would have been easier and no one would have known the difference. That is where legacy is actually constructed. Not in public moment, not in recognition, not in finished products that people praise, in the private practice that made the finished product possible. And this is important for men in your position to understand because there will be a long season where the work is invisible, where you are building and no one around you sees it yet, where the effort is real, but the results are not yet large enough to be undeniable. That season is not a detour. It is the foundation season. And the men who treat it as such, who protect the private practice with the same seriousness they would bring to a public stage, those are the men whose legacy endures. Your legacy is being written right now in how you handle this day and what you choose to do with this hour, and whether you follow through on the action step at the end of this segment or let it slide because no one is holding you accountable but yourself. This is your private practice. Honor it. Now hear this. If you are ready to move from private practice to public impact and want structured guidance for that transition, visit SolomonGraves.com to book a one-on-one session. We will map your experience, your expertise, and your next chapter with clarity and intention. Here is your action step. Identify one private discipline you have been inconsistent with. One thing you know you should be doing daily that you have been doing only occasionally. Commit to it for the next 7 days without exception. No audience, no announcement, just execution. Because the legacy you want to live starts in the private decisions you make today. Segment 6. Faith, Spirituality, and the Inner Architecture of Resilience. We have talked about structure, identity, discipline, and legacy. Now we go to the foundation beneath all of it. Because for many men who have come through the kind of pain that incarceration represents, the things that kept them standing when everything else was stripped away was not a plan. It was not a strategy. It was something deeper. Call it faith, call it spirituality, call it a connection to something larger than your circumstances. Whatever language fits your tradition and your experience, that inner architecture is real. And for some of the men who have it, it is not a supplement to the work. It is the source of the work. Faith does not replace discipline. It fuels it. Spirituality does not excuse accountability. It demands it. When you operate from a place of genuine belief that your life has purpose, that what you have been through was not random, that you are still here for a reason that has not yet been fully expressed, that belief changes how you move. You do not just grind, you build with meaning. You do not just survive, you serve. And the resilience that emerges from a spiritually grounded life is qualitatively different from the resilience that comes from willpower alone. Because willpower runs out, but purpose rooted in something transcendent does not. Whatever your relationship with faith looks like, tend to it. Not as performance, not for the audience, in private, in the quiet, in the moments when the weight is real and the answers are not yet visible. That is where the deepest strength is found. Here is your action step. Carve out 15 minutes today for a practice that connects you to your inner life. Prayer, meditation, reflection, journaling, stillness, libation, whatever your tradition calls for. Do it without distraction, without a phone, without an agenda, because the outer life you are building can only sustain what the inner life can hold. Tend to both. Segment 7. Giving back as a form of forward movement. There is a moment in the rebuilding process when the focus shifts. In the early stages, everything is necessarily inward. Identity, trust, structure, survival. You have to stabilize yourself before you can offer anything to anyone else. And that inward focus is not selfish. It is essential. But there comes a point where continued inward focus becomes a ceiling. Because the deepest growth happens when you begin to direct what you have built outward. Segment 7. Giving back as a form of forward movement. There is a moment in the rebuilding process when the focus shifts. In the early stages, everything is necessarily inward. Identity, trust, structure, survival. You have to stabilize yourself before you can offer anything to anyone else. And that inward focus is not selfish. It is essential. But there comes a point where continued inward focus becomes a ceiling, because the deepest growth happens when you begin to direct what you have built outward. When the lessons you have learned become resources for someone behind you on the path. When the clarity you have developed becomes a light for someone still in the dark. That is not altruism as a virtue. That is strategy as a practice. Because giving back does something to the giver that no amount of personal development work can fully replicate. It confirms your progress in a way that private achievement cannot. It connects your story to a larger narrative. It creates accountability to the community you are serving that deepens your own commitment to your standard. When you are responsible for others, you hold yourself to a higher level. And for men who have come through incarceration, giving back often takes a very specific and powerful form. You become the person who goes back into the programs, into the facilities, into the communities, not with pity, with proof. Proof that the cycle can end, that the label is not a life sentence, that the pain had a purpose, that the prison was not the period at the end of the story. It was a comma. Your presence in those spaces is irreplaceable because you carry a credibility that no outside voice can manufacture. Here is your action step. Identify one way you can offer something to someone who is earlier in the process than you are. A conversation, a resource, a piece of your experience organized as guidance. Then do it within the next 7 days because the path you walked becomes more meaningful the moment someone else uses it to find their way. Segment 8. Designing the next chapter with intention. Everything we have covered across these episodes has been about recovery, reconstruction, and foundation. Now it is time to talk about design because there is a difference between a man who has rebuilt what was lost and a man who has designed what has never existed. The first is recovery. The second is creation. And you are ready for both simultaneously. Designing the next chapter means getting specific about what you are building toward, not in a vague inspirational way, in a concrete architectural way. What does your life look like in 3 years if you maintain the standard you have set and continue in the direction you have chosen? Where are you living? What are you doing for income? What relationships are central to your life? What contribution are you making to your community? What does a typical day look like? What have you built that will outlast you? Those are not fantasy questions. They are design questions. And the answers become the blueprint. When you have a blueprint, your daily decisions have a reference point. Every choice can be evaluated against a single question. Does this move me toward the design or away from it? That clarity eliminates a significant amount of unnecessary deliberation. You are not deciding from scratch every day. You are executing a plan that you have already authored. You are the architect of this chapter, not the system, not your past, not the people who wrote you off. You. Here is your action step. Write a 3-year vision for your life. Be specific. Include all the dimensions we have covered across this series: identity, relationships, finances, purpose, community, and contribution. Then identify the single most important action you can take this week that moves toward that vision. Take it, because The next chapter does not write itself. You do. Segment 9. From pain and prison to purpose. This is your season. This is episode 11. And if you have been here for all the previous, you have done something that most people never do. You sat with the hard questions. You applied the action steps. You stayed in the process when it would have been easier to disengage. You did the private work that no one applauded. That is not nothing. That is everything. The title of this podcast is From Pain and Prison to Purpose. And across these episodes, we have walked every word of that title. The pain was real. Some of you are still in it, still navigating the weight of what happened, what was lost, what was taken, what you took from others. That pain is not erased by a podcast or a decision or a structured day, but it can be directed. The prison was real. For some of you, it was physical. For others, it has been the mental and emotional imprisonment that followed you out the door. The walls of a record, a label, a limiting belief, a generational pattern that told you this was as far as you go. Those walls are not permanent. They are dismantled one decision at a time. And the purpose is what you have been building toward across every segment, every action step, every private practice, and kept promise and rebuilt trust. Purpose is not a destination you are still searching for. It is already in motion. Right now, in the decision to listen, in the choice to apply, in the commitment to become something the people who wrote you off did not believe was possible. This is your season. Not a future season. Not a season that begins when conditions improve or systems become fair or people finally believe in you. This one, right now, with what you have, from where you are. The pain built you. The prison revealed you. And the purpose is yours to claim. Go claim it. I am Fortune Reigns, and this has been Fortune. Now go build yours. This was a very difficult episode for me to record. Let me tell you why. Approximately 3 days ago, 4 days ago, approximately 4 days ago, I had a slushie from 7-Eleven. It was the peach slushie, perfectly peach, something like that, the peach slushie. The free slushy that Metro by PCS offers to their customers. Uh, before I finished consuming that slushy, far before I finished consuming it, I felt my allergies flare up. My sinuses began to act up. My nasal passage began to swell up. I knew something wasn't right with that slushy. And it came to my thoughts. What's the best way to take a people out? Give them free stuff and infuse it with the necessary elements. Yeah, that slushy, it had me, well, when I rose from rest the next day, I could hardly breathe. Had to breathe with my mouth, even the night before when I laid to rest for the night. Couldn't breathe in my nose at all. And chest was inflamed, still is a little bit, but it's going away. Although through this podcast, it didn't seem like it, but it has gone away greatly because I had lost my voice. I could not talk for 2 days. My voices came back greatly, even though my sinuses and allergies are still flared up tremendously. Phlegm in my chest is about gone. Is at the end of it. And yeah, this was a difficult episode to complete. I almost did not begin it. I almost did not complete it. But how could I be an example of persistency, willpower, the strength and desire to make a difference, to complete what I start, if I had to let this situation stop me from completing this episode? Push through it. It gets better on the other side.